Good day and welcome to Big Bad Tech. I'm your instructor Jim Pytel, and today's topic of discussion is energy and power. Our objective today is to introduce the two closely related concepts of energy and power. We'll discuss the concepts that they represent, important differences between them, the units used to describe them, and the means of calculating energy, power, and time. Along the way, I plan to blow your mind with a preview of potentially mankind's most complicated creation, the smart grid. First and foremost, power is not energy, and energy is not power. If you continue to frequent this channel, understand I am unusually firm about this distinction. So much so that one might say I am a messianic jerk about it. It will be of tremendous service to keep this distinction in mind, because a misunderstanding and misapplication of these two distinct yet closely related concepts is unforgivable. It's not that energy and power are unimportant in other fields, but rather they are central to the purpose of the growing intelligent energy jobs I intend to frame this lecture series around. As such, we'll spend a little bit more time on this topic than your average textbook or general purpose basic electronics class. The first couple weeks of class is always a hectic time, and sometimes things get lost in the shuffle, but I am blatantly and emphatically telling you to pay attention, because we'll be coming back to power and energy discussions again and again. The prime distinction between power and energy is that of time. The concept of energy represents the capacity to do work. In its most basic terms, work could be mechanical in nature, as in applying a certain force for a certain distance. Depending on your preferred system of units, you could describe this force in newtons and the distance in meters, where 1 newton meter is equal to 1 joule, or you could describe the force as a pound force applied for a distance of a foot. Therefore, the derived energy unit is a foot-pound force. However, energy could be in other forms. It could also be chemical, nuclear, electrical, thermal, and more. Additionally, it can be converted between forms. Consider a quantity of gasoline, a form of stored chemical energy. This gasoline can be burned in an uncontrolled manner and produce nothing but heat, sound, and burned rednecks, or burned in a controlled manner in an automobile and produce mechanical movement, sound, and supplemental electrical energy to charge the batteries, run the lights and radio, and themselves being a form of radiant and sonic energy. Power, however, is different than energy. Realize that power is a measure of the time rate consumption or generation of energy, meaning power is energy per unit time. And by extension, energy is power consumed or generated for a period of time. Be aware that the law of conservation of energy states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed and only change in form. Therefore, the terms consumed and generated comes attached with some disclaimers. It would be far more appropriate to say that an electrical motor does not consume electrical energy, but rather converts electrical energy into rotating mechanical energy minus losses. Additionally, it would be more appropriate to say a wind turbine does not generate electrical energy, but rather converts the mechanical energy of moving air particles into electrical energy minus losses. Regardless, the distinction between energy being power expressed for a period of time and power being energy consumed or generated per unit time holds true. This important difference bounces off the skulls of many people, and I consider it one of my highest responsibilities to force it through their skulls with repeated aggressive hammering. One of the most effective ways I've ever found to convey this distinction is using the analogy of money. Money is energy. If you've got a lot of money in your bank account, you can do a lot of things. The same thing goes for energy. How you get that money or energy is via one of two methods. One, you could work a really poor-paying job for a long time, or you could work a really well-paying job for a short period of time, and then just goof around and take up an expensive hobby like sailing. Anyways, your pay rate is power and is expressed in units of dollars per hour or energy per unit time. The units make sense. To calculate your paycheck at the end of the week, multiply your pay rate by the number of hours you worked. Dollars per hour times hours equals dollars. If you wish to calculate the number of hours it would take to accumulate a certain amount of money, you would manipulate the same equation to solve for time, where dollars divided by dollars per hour is equal to hours. If you wish to calculate your pay rate following a task, Again, one would manipulate the same equation to solve for pay rate. Take the sum of money you earned and divide it by the time it took you to earn it. Dollars divided by hour is dollars per hour. Notice what we've created is a very simple three-variable relationship that can be expressed either conceptually or with units. The concept of money is represented at the apex of our pyramid, as it should be for all good capitalist societies, with pay rate and time below it. The units used to represent these concepts are similarly located in a matching pyramid relationship. When presenting these topics, I use parentheses to signify units, representing concepts to prevent confusion. Use whichever pyramid or both that most comfortably fits your mathematical level of competency. You can also just combine them into one pyramid relationship. To use this pyramid relationship, it is super easy. To solve for money, cover it up. Take pay rate and multiply it times time, because they're side by side. To solve for time, cover it up. In this case, money is over pay rate, so we divide our money by our pay rate. To solve for pay rate, cover it up. In this case, money is over time, so we divide money by time to solve for pay rate. This simple triangle relationship is very handy, and you'll find yourself using it over and over for a number of different concepts. Returning from this analogy, the same pyramid relationship is true for the concepts and units of energy and power. Sometimes you'll see the concept of energy symbolized by a script W in textbooks of ill repute. I am expressly urging to not do this for two very important reasons. First, a common unit of power, the watt, is expressed as a regular W, and it would be very easy to confuse the two and totally violate the number one principle of this lecture, our previously declared maxim that energy is not power. Second, and far more important than the first reason, is that script W is cursive. The last time I saw somebody use a quill and ink pot was maybe the 1800s. And I feel I'm justified in saying that cursive has much place in our modern society as a pocket watch, bloodlettings, and beaver tail hats. I consider it one of my higher purposes in life to rid the world of this ancient and wholly illegible scribble-scrabble. The prime directive for all labs is to show up on time, show up prepared, show up with a pencil, not a pen, and don't use cursive. Anyways, we can use our pyramid relationship for power and energy. To solve for energy, cover it up. Take power and multiply it by time because they're side by side. To solve for power, cover it up. Notice energy is over time. Therefore, we need to divide energy by time to solve for power. To solve for time, cover it up. Divide energy by power because energy is over power. Like I said, this pyramid relationship is very, very handy. A quick word about units. The SI unit of energy is a joule. If you unwrap this a little bit further, you'll realize a joule is 1 Newton of force expressed a linear distance of 1 meter. Alternate system of units use pound force for force and a foot for distance. Therefore, it's a derived unit of energy called a foot-pound force. The two system of units do not correspond one-to-one, and you must convert between them. Additionally, the SI unit for power is the watt, where 1 watt is equivalent to the generation or consumption of 1 joule per second. Alternate systems of units will use the derived unit of power of 1 foot-pound force per second. Again, the two system units do not correspond one-to-one, and you must convert between them. Finally, there's a very common unit of packaging up power measurements, namely the horsepower, where 1 horsepower is equivalent to 746 watts or 550 foot-pounds force per second. Despite its archaic and somewhat inaccurate measurement of a true horse's power, this makes a really handy bridge between the two system of units. I'm an extremely passionate advocate for the metric SI system. However, I still have a tendency to think in terms of horsepower, because it gives me a quick idea if I can stop something moving with my hands, with 2 hands, with some sweating, or if this device is just going to rip my balls out of my sockets if I try to grab it. Let's go ahead and clean up our workspace and do a couple quick examples about power and energy calculations. In our first example, consider a task that requires 1,000 joules of energy to complete. This task could be the application of 500 newtons of force for a distance of 2 meters, or the application of 250 newtons for 4 meters, or any other combination that gives us 1,000 joules of energy to complete our task. In both cases, the energy or work required to move this object is the same, 1,000 joules of energy. To accomplish this task, we could use powerful or less powerful means to do so. For example, if we put 1 joule of energy per second into it, or 1 watt of power, how long would it take us to accomplish this task? Pause the lecture and see if you can make sense of this. In this case, we're given an energy requirement of 1,000 joules. We're given a power input of 1 watt. What we're being asked to solve for is time. What we're going to do is we're going to cover up time and realize that energy is over power. Therefore, our expression would be time equals energy over power. 1,000 joules divided by 1 watt, or 1 joule per second, gives us a time requirement of 1,000 seconds to complete this task. Now, what would happen if we changed our power input and we increased our power input to 100 watts, or 100 joules per second? We would still use the same equation where time is equal to energy divided by power, substituted in the appropriate values, yields a result of 10 seconds. This makes perfect sense. A more powerful device accomplished the same task in less time. We could do the same type of calculation using imperial units. My question is why would you want to? The SI metric system with engineering units is far easier to use than any imperial equivalent. But because we're hard-headed, we're going to go ahead and try an example. Let's say we wanted to lift your 170-pound lab partner 50 feet. If we're applying a force of 170 pounds, a distance of 50 feet, looks like we've got an energy requirement of 8,500 foot-pounds force. If we're going to put 2 horsepower of power into this, how long will it take us to lift our lab partner 50 feet? In this case, we've got to do a conversion of 2 horsepower into its foot-pounds force per second equivalent. What we do is a unit conversion where we multiply 2 horsepower times the quantity 1. In this case, what is 1? What we do is we want the units of foot-pounds force per second on the top, and we don't want the units of horsepower on the bottom. If 1 horsepower equals 550 foot-pounds force per second, what we do is put 550 foot-pounds force per second on the top and 1 horsepower on the bottom. The units we don't want cancel out, and we get an equivalent of 1,100 foot-pounds force per second power input to our system. Now, to solve for the time, we're using the exact same relationship we had earlier, where time is equivalent to energy divided by power. Substituting in the appropriate values, we find a time requirement of roughly 7.73 seconds. Let's take a look at the energy and power relationship from a totally different perspective. What if we were to use a device of fixed power output for a variant amount of time? It stands to conjecture that the same device of constant power rating could convert more energy if we used it longer. For example, consider a 1 kilowatt solar array operating at 1 hour at full capacity. How much energy would it produce? What if this same 1 kilowatt solar array was operating at full capacity for 4 hours? How much energy would it produce then? The answer is surprisingly simple, and the common unit used is one of the biggest sources of confusion for those with difficulties distinguishing between power and energy. Energy is equal to power times time. A 1 kilowatt solar array operating for 1 hour produces 1 kilowatt hour of energy, and a 1 kilowatt solar array operating for 4 hours produces 4 kilowatt hours of energy. The unit of kilowatt hour is a unit of energy, and it is not a unit of power. I know there's a watt in there, which is a unit of power, but look at it. It's watts times hour, or power times time. The K prefix means 1,000. If you don't believe me, unwrap it and prove it to yourself. If 1 kilowatt actually means 1,000 watts, and 1,000 watts actually means 1,000 joules per second, and 1 hour actually means 60 minutes, and 1 minute actually equals 60 seconds, what we get is 3,600,000 joules, or the engineering prefix equivalent, 3.6 megajoules, meaning 1 kilowatt hour, a unit of energy, is equivalent to 3.6 megajoules, a unit of energy. Why does the electric company bill you in kilowatt hours and not joules? Look at it. Joules are annoying. They're tiny, tiny, weird, unwieldy units. The common unit of energy is the kilowatt hour. I know I just baited and switched you, but I dare you to be the one guy in the room that presents the annual energy output of the entire Columbia River Basin power system in units of joules without using SI engineering prefixes. Most likely your keyboard's zero key will fall off before you're done. If you wanted to be hard-headed about it and figure out the energy output of our 1 kilowatt solar array operating for 4 hours in units of joules, we'd have to do a unit conversion where 1 kilowatt hour is equivalent to 3.6 megajoules. Therefore, our 1 kilowatt solar array operating for 4 hours will produce 14.4 megajoules output. I'd much prefer to use the kilowatt hour as an easier to read and far easier to calculate unit of energy. These prefixes are incredibly handy. Or again, a K is equal to 1,000, so 1 kilowatt hour is 1,000 watt hours. 1 megawatt hour is equivalent to 1 million watt hours, and if you think about it, it's equivalent to 1,000 kilowatt hours. If you look at information on large generation facilities, like example a hydroelectric dam, a nuclear power plant, or a wind turbine daily and annual energy output, sometimes you'll see figures in the megawatt hour or gigawatt hour range, where a gigawatt hour is equal to 1 billion watt hours, 1 million kilowatt hours, or 1,000 megawatt hours. Again, these prefixes are just great shortcuts to say that the next highest prefix is 1,000 times larger than the one smaller than it. All you got to do is just keep track of which unit you're using. Consider, for example, a 2.3 megawatt wind turbine. How much energy would it produce over the course of a single day if it was operating at full capacity for only 8 hours of that day? What is energy? Energy is power times time. Substituting in the appropriate values, 2.3 megawatts times 8 hours gives us 18.4 megawatt hours of energy production, which is kind of nonsense to me because what's the common unit of energy used by the electrical utility? It's the kilowatt hour. So how many megawatt hours is a kilowatt hour? We have to do a unit conversion, where 1 megawatt hour is equivalent to 1,000 kilowatt hours. The units of megawatt hours cancel out, giving us an energy output of 18,400 kilowatt hours. If the electrical utility was crediting you 10 cents per kilowatt hour, how much money did this wind turbine earn you in that 8-hour period? It would be 18,400 kilowatt hours times 10 cents per kilowatt hour, yielding us $1,840. Let's say this single wind turbine, over the course of a year, is on average operates at peak capacity 8 hours of every 24 hours, meaning basically on every day it earns $1,840. If it did this for 365 days, annually this turbine would expect to earn you $671,600. No wonder maintenance of these turbines to keep them operating at peak capacity is given such a high priority. Again, this thing's only working 8 out of every 24 hours on average, and it's earning you close to $250,000. Let's try another simple example about energy calculations. Let's say you use a 500 watt heater. for 4 hours a day. Let's see if you can determine the energy requirement in kilowatt hours. And just to be hard-headed, let's see if we can do the energy requirement in joules. In this case, energy is power times time. If it's a 500 watt device used for 4 hours, you'd be using 2,000 watt hours of energy, or 2 kilowatt hours. If you want to figure this out in joules, we'd have to do a string of unit conversions where 1 hour is equal to 60 minutes and 1 minute is equal to 60 seconds, giving us an energy requirement of 7.2 megajoules. Let's say if you accidentally left this heater on for 24 hours, basically you'd be using 12 kilowatt hours of energy. Let's say your electrical energy utility was charging you 10 cents per kilowatt hour. If you left that heater on all day, you'd be charged $1.20. If this is the only device you intend to use, calculating your energy requirement for daily, weekly, monthly, and annual budgets is very easy. Obviously, if you've got a number of different devices with different usage patterns, you have to account for all these individual differences. For example, 4 lights used for 4 hours a day, an oven used for 1 hour a day, a well pump used for an hour a day, or any other device you plan on using. Energy budget calculations for off-grid applications are a topic worthy of further discussions in much later lectures. It should be relatively easy to do these energy and power calculations if you continue to use this pyramid relationship. One great analysis technique is to play around with the relationship without numbers. Let's say if you had a device of fixed power relationship and you increased the amount of time you used it, energy should go up. If it doesn't, you're doing it wrong. If you've got a fixed time and you use a device of very small power output, your energy output should be small in comparison to a device used for the same amount of time with a larger power output. If it doesn't, you're doing it wrong. This serves as a great means of checking your work. Numbers aside, if your answer hasn't tracked your relationship, you need to perform a tactical retreat and reassess your situation. Now that we've got some practice with our basic energy and power relationship, let's go into depth with some discussions about energy and power and talk about smart energy use, smart grids, and dumb people. Consider the instantaneous, hourly, daily, monthly, and annual energy consumption for the following light bulbs: a 100 watt incandescent light bulb, a 15 watt compact fluorescent light bulb, and a 5 watt LED light bulb. Each light bulb produces the same amount of lumens or light intensity. However, the electrical power consumption of these devices obviously varies widely. Every second the 100 watt light bulb is being used, it would be consuming 100 joules of energy. The compact fluorescent light, every second it's being used, is consuming 15 joules of energy, and every second the LED light bulb is used, it's consuming 5 joules of energy, and they're all outputting the same amount of light. Can you see where I'm going with this already? The energy consumption for these 3 different devices is already rapidly diverging. We've only used them for 1 second, even though they are producing the same functional product, namely light of a given intensity. Be aware, I am not so naive to suggest that a compact fluorescent light or an LED will be sufficient for all tasks requiring a certain light quality, let's say painting a picture or alone time with your imaginary girlfriend, but I am confident enough to say that if you require light of a given intensity and quantity, let's say task lighting in a factory, or to light up your front steps so you don't bust your ass falling down them, you'd be an idiot to use a 100 watt incandescent light bulb to do so. There exists a population of paranoid gullible jerks quick to seize upon the drawbacks of CFLs and LEDs, primarily that of production, disposal, and expense. I will not deny that CFLs and LEDs are initially more expensive and are manufactured with harmful chemicals and require special disposal precautions. These are undeniable facts. However, even the laziest and briefest of examinations quickly dispel these concerns as unwarranted. I am sick of these people dominating our discourse in media and politics, and it's about time you got sick of it too. Even from our first calculation, it's readily apparent that over time, energy consumption costs will quickly outpace the initial expense for these advanced technologies. We'll arrive at some concrete numbers in a moment. Regarding the production and disposal issue, my question is to you, when was the last time you ate a light bulb? Yes, CFLs and LEDs are more complicated than incandescents. That's the point. They save energy because they're not simple inventions from the 1800s. The future of intelligent energy will be far more complicated than the simple division of black and white, good and bad. I never said it was going to be easy. In fact, I'm telling you right up front, it's going to be hard, complicated, messy, and nasty. My goal is to prepare you with the skills necessary to survive in a world where the smart and strong live and the lazy and stupid are replaced by robots. Moving on, we realize that a 100-watt light bulb used for 1 hour consumes 100 watt-hours of energy. If you want to be hard-headed and you want to keep this in unadulterated pure SI units of energy, namely joules, we need to convert hours into seconds, and would yield 360 kilojoules using an appropriate engineering prefix. I know, this is annoying. I think I'm just going to drop the joules and stick with watt-hours and kilowatt-hours for energy consumption figures for our later discussions. Let's think about our daily consumption. Given a light bulb isn't used all day, that is, unless you got a couple teenagers at home, it's normally only used at night. Let's say we use it 4 hours a day. A 100-watt light bulb would consume 400 watt-hours of energy. 15-watt CFL would consume 60 watt-hours of energy. And our 5-watt LED would consume 20 watt-hours of energy over this 4-hour period. And again, they're giving you the same amount of output, light. Let's say you did this for 30 days or 1 month. Again, keeping with that 4-hour daily consumption. For this 1 month period, the 100-watt light bulb used 4 hours a day would consume 12 kilowatt hours of energy. The 15-watt CFL would consume 1.8 kilowatt hours of energy. And the 5-watt LED would only be consuming 600 watt hours or 0.6 kilowatt hours of energy. Now, let's say you did this over the course of a 365-day year, where again, we're keeping that 4-hour consumption every single day usage pattern. Your 100-watt incandescent would consume 146 kilowatt hours of energy. The 15-watt CFL would consume 21.9 kilowatt hours of energy. And the 5-watt LED would consume 7.3 kilowatt hours of energy. Let's put this in figures you can really understand. Let's say you were charged 12 cents per kilowatt hour by your electrical utility. How much would it cost per year to run your 100-watt incandescent compared to the 15-watt CFL and the 5-watt LED? The use of the incandescent would cost you $17.52. The use of the CFL would cost you $2.63, and the use of the LED would cost you only 88 cents. Does the initial expense of a CFL or LED outweigh its consumption? You're darn right it does. Especially considering even a cheaply constructed CFL outlasts a common incandescent by at least 2 to 1. As long as you don't eat the damn thing, I think it's a good investment. Now, if you're one of those folks that have already converted to CFLs, don't just pause the lecture and run down to your hardware store and buy an LED. My advice is just keep running your CFL until it dies in the next 2 to 5 years and dispose of it properly, i.e. don't eat it and then replace it with an LED. Because the cost difference between these two levels of performance is substantially smaller than that of the incandescent to CFL conversion. Moving on, our next in-depth example takes us to a small island nation, of which you are the supreme leader, dictator for life, and most honorable protector. As such, you must ensure the safety and comfort of your citizens, lest they revolt and hack you to pieces with their shovels and sharp farming implements. Let's say your small island nation consists of 20 houses, each of which has certain daily energy and power requirements and tasks it must accomplish. In this extremely simple example, let's say each house has a 1 kilowatt clothes washer. It takes 1 hour to wash a set of clothes, and they've got to do 1 load every single day. Therefore, a single house would consume 1 kilowatt hour of energy every time it washes clothes. In addition to this task, let's say each house consumes 1 kilowatt constantly, meaning every second, every hour of every day. It's consuming this 1 kilowatt of power constantly to keep up with the daily tasks of heating, cooling, refrigeration, and dissemination of your 24-hour propaganda. And again, to repeat, when I say continually, I mean continually, as in all day, every second of every day, it's consuming 1 kilowatt of power. Over the course of a single day, therefore, the consumption of energy is 24 kilowatt hours. If this is constantly happening every single day, and you got to do 1 load of laundry every single day, what's the daily energy requirement of each house? The answer is pretty simple. 25 kilowatt hours. If we drew the power requirements for each house compared to time, what we'd see is this constant 1 kilowatt draw until that person decides to do a load of laundry, at which we'd see a 2 kilowatt peak demand. Now think about this in the terms of the village. You got 20 houses that are doing this. If each house is consuming 25 kilowatt hours a day, how much energy do 20 houses consume? The answer is real simple. 20 times 25. Your whole island nation would consume 500 kilowatt hours every single day. My question to you is, what size generator must you purchase to supply your small island nation? Now keep in mind, you want to be cost conscious, because you've got your eye on a really nice helicopter gunship and a couple intercontinental ballistic missiles that'll go great with your rich uranium mines. Let's go about this the dumb and hard way. Again, look back at our time use graph. If each house was continually requiring 1 kilowatt, our base power consumption, meaning what we regularly constantly are drawing for 20 houses, would be 20 kilowatts. However, in the worst case scenario, where every single one of your 20 houses takes their alpha particle laden workwear and shoves them into the washer and presses start button simultaneously, you're going to get a 40 kilowatt peak load. This means you've got to purchase, at a minimum, a 40 kilowatt generator. This 40 kilowatt generator is big, heavy, and expensive. And what's embarrassing? You're only using it at full capacity for 1 hour of every day. The other 23 hours, it's running at half capacity, or 20 kilowatts, while all the other small island nation dictators are jetting from island to island, blowing each other up and threatening first world nations with newfound weapons of mass destruction. You're just going to look out of your compound window, see that heavy, expensive, and idle 40 kilowatt generator and sigh wistfully, wishing you could do the same. This is a centralized generation and distribution strategy, and it is the hard and dumb way to go about it. And unfortunately, largely how we as a society manage our energy infrastructure today. However, being the cunning and ruthless leader you are, you decide to adopt a smart grid for your island nation. In this case, your houses are equipped with smart washers and a distributed communication and control network. Now, for this part of the example, you cannot change the energy consumption requirements of your citizens. After all, they need to be clean, comfortable, and well informed. You can, however, change when your citizens require energy. Not much you can do about the 1 kilowatt baseload conditions, because that's constant. The 1 kilowatt washers, however, simply take turns when they run. If each citizen dumps a load of dirty clothes into the washer when they return from work, the distributed communication control network just takes it from there. It runs each clothes washer once over the course of the day. This one's ran there, this one's ran there, and the next one, and so on and so forth. It does not matter when the clothes are washed. It just matters that they're washed. Once one load is completed, it simply starts the other load and so on down the line. In this case, we still have a 20 kilowatt base load, but the smart grid enables the time-distributed tasks to be broken into 20 separate 1 kilowatt peaks. Therefore, the maximum load your generator ever sees is 21 kilowatts. The 21 kilowatt genset paired with a smart grid distributed communication and control network is substantially cheaper and lighter than a 40 kilowatt genset and a dumb grid. Helicopter gunship, here we come. In both cases, our energy consumption requirement never changed. We still used 500 kilowatt hours of energy over the course of a single day. It's just that the traditional centralized generation means used a lot of it at once, and our simple smart grid spread it out over the course of the day. I will admit the smart grid is more complicated than our previous traditional dumb grid. I never said it wasn't going to be more complicated. In fact, I will tell you right up front, the The smart grid is going to be the most complicated thing mankind has yet created. If you want simple, by all means, live a simple life, sit around and play video games, don't study, and don't complain when you're replaced by a robot. Our island nation example is exceedingly contrived, however, really hits at how a basic understanding of energy and power have a large and lasting contribution towards human society faced with the prospects of increasing population and dwindling resources. Imagine the coordination and, oh no, cooperation that must occur if we as a society wish to share this earth free of resource conflict. If, that's the big word, if we wish to live on a planet free of resource conflict. Don't you think that we as moral and most importantly rational human beings can find a better way to go about this rather than spending our last minutes on Earth squabbling about the shrinking pools of dead dinosaur goo that always seem to be found in the nastiest places on Earth? In this spirit, let's consider integration of renewable resources into our island nation smart grid. Let's say you've got a 12 kilowatt solar array and a 12 kilowatt wind turbine. When it's sunny, use the sun. When it's windy, use the wind. In both cases, the central generator can be run at reduced capacity, allowing you to conserve the fuel for other purposes. After all, you've got a shiny new helicopter gunship, and those other islands aren't going to oppress themselves. In fact, consider a sunny, windy day when both your array and wind turbine are operating at full capacity, basically at 24 kilowatts. In excess of our normal 20 kilowatt base draw on our 1 kilowatt addition. In this case, there's excess renewable energy, and by all means, act like a sailor on shore leave and spend it all when you've got it. Meaning if both the solar array and wind turbine are at full capacity, you've got the power to run a couple additional washing machines simultaneously, thereby saving even more fuel when the wind and sun aren't there. One can further modify this smart grid not only to coordinate loads and use renewable energy, but also allow for storage. In the event of excess renewable energy generation and everybody's clothes are clean, one can dump the excess into a battery bank. When it's neither sunny nor windy, one can draw the battery bank down until it becomes necessary to crank up the genset again. Think of all the fuel you'd save with a smart grid paired with renewable energy and storage. But wait, that's not all. We've been operating this whole time under the flawed assumption that our baseload is a hard floor and cannot possibly be reduced. In fact, the reduction of baseload conditions is often the first and most important step in intelligent energy management principles. Simply by upgrading the insulation, ventilation, and appliances inside our 20-home community, one could achieve substantial cost reductions. We've assumed that each house continually draws 1 kilowatt from the grid constantly. A large portion of residential energy use is water heating, refrigeration, and space conditioning devices that more or less run continuously. What if each of these were upgraded to reduce consumption? Each electric water heater could be paired with a solar thermal preheater. Each refrigerator could be a modern, efficient model, and not those rusty lead-lined boxes your grandparents used to store mammoth meat. Each house could be insulated for cold and shaded for heat simply by planting a couple trees. Each teenager could learn to shut the damn refrigerator door and turn off the lights when they're not being used. Yes, we are talking behavior modification. All these small steps taken together adds to sufficient savings when you extrapolate it over a large community. And let's say taken all together, we can reduce the energy consumption of these houses by 15% or drop it by 150 watts each. Therefore, our constant consumption would only be 850 watts or 0.85 kilowatts. This 150 watt savings might seem insignificant to you on an individual house level, but think of all the communal savings. With 20 houses, our baseload just dropped 20 times 150, or 3 kilowatts. Therefore, again, allowing us the ability to purchase a smaller main genset and use less fuel when it's running. Not to mention the ability to cover most of our consumption now with renewable resources when the solar array and the wind turbine are running at full capacity. This across-the-board cut, in this case of 3 kilowatts, is sometimes known as megawatts. a term coined by the founder of the Rocky Mountain Institute, Amory Lovins. A negawatt is a wordplay on the SI engineering prefixes, meaning that this is power you do not need to generate. Our souped-up smart grid with solar, wind, storage, and efficiency upgrades produces some major negawatts, even when there is no sun, no wind, and no stored energy in our battery bank. Again, consider our centralized 40 kilowatt genset as the worst case scenario, i.e. the dumbest and most inefficient means of going about this task, and compare it to our smart grid with efficiency upgrades. In this case, if each house only consumes 850 watts constantly, you've got a base load of 17 kilowatts. In addition to this constant base load, you've got a properly time-managed 1 kilowatt peak that can be distributed 20 times over the course of a 24-hour day. In this case, the generator could be downsized to 18 kilowatts. The negawatts generated by a simple rethinking of how you generate, manage, distribute, and use energy is 12 kilowatts, meaning just by being smart, this is 12 kilowatts of power you do not have to generate. Now add all those renewable resources and storage to the mix, and you can generate some serious negawatts and divert all that fuel you'd ordinarily have to use for generation towards some really awesome helicopter rides. World conquest is at your doorstep. Despite this island example being a contrived situation, I'm aware that I just laid some heavy concepts on you in an early lecture. Some of y'all may have followed along, and some of y'all's brains may have just folded like an origami ballerina. The great part about having these lectures online is that you can always stop, rewind, and review these things as many times as you need to make sure you're tracking. Alright, before we wrap this lecture up, let's do one more illustrated example problem using our previously discussed light bulb scenario. However, this time what we're going to do is extrapolate this information across the United States. What we're going to do is we're going to have a showdown between the 100 watt incandescent versus the 15 watt CFL. What I want to know is how much energy incandescent light bulbs use over the course of a year. Once you get this figure, I want to know how much energy we save if we switch to CFLs. Finally, I want to know the cost savings if we did so. To do this and make this a solvable problem, we've got to make some wildly inaccurate guesses and approximations so this doesn't devolve into a haystack of problems. Let's assume there are 280 million light bulb using people in the US, and everybody uses a light bulb 4 hours a day. Yes, I know everybody doesn't need an individual light bulb for group tasks like eating dinner or playing cards, and I know some people use far more light bulbs for far more hours to light up their entryways, billboards, and office spaces, but this is the number we're going to use. Additionally, we're going to assume the cost of electrical energy is 12 cents per kilowatt hour. In addition to an illustration of energy and power calculations, this is a great chance to use your engineering prefixes, so stay organized. Pause the lecture and see if you can take your best shot at this. So every person, every day, is going to use a 100 watt light bulb for 4 hours. Energy is power times time. So every day, each person uses 400 watt hours of energy, which we can convert to 0.4 kilowatt hours, since this is the unit we'll use for cost. If there are 280 million of us doing this, every day we're using 112 million kilowatt hours. Or if you want to get really fancy, 112,000 megawatt hours, or 112 gigawatt hours every single day. Now, considering a year has 365 days, annually we'd be using 40,880 million kilowatt hours, or 40,880,000 megawatt hours, or 40,880 gigawatt hours, or in its most appropriate engineering prefix, 40.88 terawatt hours. If you're getting charged 12 cents per kilowatt hour, how much does the annual energy use of these 100 watt incandescent bulbs cost the country? The answer is $4,905,600,000. Okay, let's take these figures that we got for our 100 watt incandescent bulb, put them to the side, and we'll do the same figures if everybody switched to 15 watt CFL light bulbs. So here's the summation of our figures for our 100 watt incandescent, where if 280 million of us were using 100 watt light bulbs 4 hours a day, the daily energy requirement would be 112 gigawatt hours. The annual energy requirement would be 4.88 terawatt hours. And the annual cost will be close to $5 billion. Try this again for the 15 watt CFL. We realize a 15 watt CFL used for 4 hours a day uses 60 watt hours of energy. 280 million of us are doing this every single day. It's 280 million times 60 watt hours, or 16,800,000 watt hours. And if we want to make it simple, we can make that 16,800,000 kilowatt hours, 16,800 megawatt hours, or its most appropriate engineering prefix, 16.8 gigawatt hours. If you really think about this, if a 100 watt light bulb represents 100%, a 15 watt light bulb represents 15%. So in reality, our daily energy requirement should be 15% of our original 112 gigawatt hours. Is that true? 112 times 0.15 is in fact equal to 16.8 gigawatt hours. Again, think about it. We're doing this for 365 days a year. So the annual energy cost of a 15 watt CFL used for 4 hours a piece for 280 million people should be 365 times 16.8 gigawatt hours. Again, using our earlier shortcut, we can also just say it's 15% of a 100 watt light bulb, or 6.132 terawatt hours. In this case, our annual expense would also be 15% of the same expenditure for the 100 watt light bulb, or in this case, 6.132 terawatt hours times 12 cents per kilowatt hour, where you've got to go ahead and do the conversion of terawatt hours to kilowatt hours. Regardless, the annual cost of using 15 watt CFL for 4 hours a day for 280 million people is going to be $735,840,000. I mean, look at the tremendous savings here. You're talking about $4.9 billion versus $735 million. This is where those prefixes come into play. A billion is substantially larger than a million. What's the cost savings in between these? Well, the answer is it's $4,905,600,000 minus $735,840,000, yielding us a total cost savings of $4,169,760,000. Sure, the 85 watt reduction switching from an incandescent to a CFL may seem like a drop in the bucket when taken individually. However, 280 million drops fill up a lot of buckets really quick and amount to substantial cost savings. This $4 billion plus annual savings is more than enough money to fund worthy and lasting investments in infrastructure maintenance, transmission upgrades, renewable resource research and development, technical education, or a single advanced stealth bomber to accompany about 5 minutes of yeehaw cowboy shoot 'em up foreign policy in the worst spots on Earth. Moving on, let's assume everyone in the US turns on these 280 million light bulbs simultaneously. I know this doesn't happen, but it'd be a worthy prank if you could organize all 280 million of us to do so. All 280 million of us were to use 100 watt incandescents. You'd see an instantaneous demand of 280 million times 100 watts, or 28 gigawatts. This is a prank of epic proportions because such an instantaneous demand would probably not be well handled by our aging electrical grid. If, however, all 280 million of us were using 15 watt compact fluorescent lights, we'd only see a 4.2 gigawatt surge. Consider the difference between these two figures here. Simply by using a modern CFL technology, we don't need to generate 23.8 gigawatts of power. This is our negawatt savings, to use a term I will never tire of applying. Alright, if I have not yet convinced you of the inadequacy of the incandescent light in comparison to modern CFL and LED technology, don't worry. I will continue to berate these bulbs in later lectures on efficiency. Until then, make sure you dispose of used CFLs properly and don't eat them. Okay, right now we need to wrap it up and send you back to the real world feeling like you've learned something. In conclusion, this lecture presented energy and power calculations. We discussed the concepts they represent, important differences between them, the units used to describe them, and the means of calculating them. Along the way, I gave you a sneak peek at the smart grid, paired with renewable energy and storage, and compared and contrasted it to traditional hard-headed centralized generation and distribution strategies. Remember to review this material as often as you need to really drive it home. Imagine how well lab will go if you know what you're doing. You never know when or where you'll be called upon to perform energy and power calculations, but rest assured you most certainly will be called upon. When that occasion arises, you'll be up to the task. Thank you very much for your attention and interest, and we'll see you again during the next lecture of our series. Remember to tell your Lazy Lab partner about this resource, and be sure to check out the Big Bad Tech playlist for additional resources and updates.